I told him that I wanted to stop having premarital sex. He just told me that if we are taking away sex, then we shouldn't be going on dates. Previously, we had an agreement on a 2-date minimum per month because I wanted to see more effort and I wanted to come up with new experiences for us. What should my next steps be, or what should I say to him regarding the importance of dating? What's up, fam? Welcome back to our channel. My name is Tim. This is my beautiful wife, Pauline, and you were tuning in to the W Podcast, where you get wisdom in the word with the
Wheelers.
Hey, so we are super excited for you to join us this week. We're doing a Q&A, answering questions that people have sent us. We got some spicy questions.
Yeah.
We're talking about what should you do when your girlfriend or your boyfriend have experienced church hurt? Or honestly, that situation, they said fiance has experienced church hurt and don't love Jesus. We're talking about what do you do when you have a soul tie?
Yeah.
Like, how do you handle that? There's another question that I think we're really going to get into, talking about when should you pray together when you're dating? Should you not pray?
That look like? Also, how to make friends with the opposite sex in a platonic way and not be weird. Is that the right thing to do, the wrong thing to do?
Yeah, absolutely. And also talking about what do you do? This is the craziest one. Somebody asked us, what do you do when you told your boyfriend you don't want to have sex anymore? And then they said, well, we're not going to go on dates anymore. I'm telling you, you want to make sure you tune in and lock and load it, because this episode is going to get real. It's going to be very helpful, and it's going to be entertaining. So without further ado, let's get into it. So the first question that we have this week was, how do you untangle a soul tie? And I feel like that's something we kind of touched on before.
Yes, definitely. We can talk about it again because, of course.
Yeah, absolutely. You had a really good response to this. I would love for you to go first because you said something and I was like, that was good. I was like, that's good. You remember?
Yeah, I mean, soul ties are an interesting topic because some people don't even, like, I don't want to say believe in them, but pretty much. Like, some people don't really, sometimes people think Christians, church people give them too much stock and it's too much, like, something that they get hung up on. And someone can even say, like, it's an excuse for not kind of like moving on, or say like, oh, well, I have a soul tie with this person. That's why I'm still thinking about my ex, or whatever the case is. But I think that it can definitely be like a Christianese term, like soul tie. I don't think I ever heard about that before I started being like heavy into Christian community. But if you kind of like break it down, like, what does it mean to untangle a soul tie? Well, what does it mean?
Well, I think you just said something good. And everyone that's here live may understand what it is, but just in case someone watching this on the replay is like, what is a soul tie? Like, I just have a definition, if you don't mind.
Yeah, please.
Now, if you Google soul tie definition, there is no Webster.
I don't think it's,
I don't see a Webster dictionary. So we're going a little ghetto here, where the Urban Dictionary says that a spiritual/emotional connection. This is what a soul tie is. A spiritual/emotional connection you have to someone after being intimate with them, usually engaging in sexual intercourse, to the point that when you want to be rid of them from your mind and your life, even when you are far away from them and out of their presence, you still feel as if they're a part of you, and a part of you is with them. Now, before Pauline finishes, I will say that there's a debate that soul ties are not biblical.
Yeah.
So, I mean, that's something that you can kind of take on your own and pray about if that's something you care about. But that's just context on just that term and that phrase.
Yeah. So I think kind of unspiritualizing it, if it is something that's super spiritual, just thinking about how to untangle a tie. So if you had like a knot in your necklace, I don't know if that's ever happened to one of you listening. Like, that's happened to me so many times, where I like pack away a necklace and I don't pack it properly, and then when I go to take it out, it has a knot. And if I put something, like if I've gone to the gym and like take my necklace off and put it in my purse, and when I get dressed again, it's all knotted. So that's what I think about of like a tie or a knot. I know the term is not soul knot, but if I think about a tie, you tie your shoes, usually you're tying something into a knot. And so you're intertwined with that person emotionally, physically, spiritually. That's usually what it means. It's like, hey, I can't break free. I can't untie this knot that I have with this person. So whenever you have a knot, whether it be in your shoe, in your necklace, whatever, when you're untangling it, you do it very slowly. So you don't break the chain of your necklace or whatever the case is. And I think that we need to take that same approach of gentleness when it comes to our hearts and our souls. Because regardless of if a soul tie is real or not, obviously it's something that you are struggling with, and it's something that you are trying to seek God's help from and get free of. That's basically what it is you're looking for freedom. And it's something that you probably ended up with due to sin. So obviously that definition that you gave was like talking about someone that you were most likely physically intimate with. Obviously, some people feel that they have, I shouldn't say obviously, but there are cases I've heard where people feel they have soul ties with friends. And that's kind of a whole different thing, because you obviously can sin with your friends, and that's not to be sexual sin, but it can be like just inappropriate relationships, behaviors, whatever the case is. And sometimes you feel like you can't break free of this friend. Every time that I try to do good, they come back around, that type of thing. But yeah, so you want to do it gently, because I think sometimes it's so easy for us just to like want to kind of change our lives cold turkey and like, okay, well, I'm going to stop smoking weed. I want to stop having sex. I'm going to stop binge eating or whatever it is that you're struggling with. We have to kind of approach our toxic and our unhealthy relationships the same way. Of course, if we're talking about romantic relationships, like you absolutely can break up with somebody one night and like it's over. But usually that's not how it happens. Like you don't just wake up in the morning one day and say, I don't love this person anymore, I'm done with you. It's a gradual disconnection. Even when we talk about marriage and the process of divorce, people always leave emotionally before they leave physically, like physically leave a house or physically get divorced. A lot of times people say, hey, we haven't been married for years, we haven't acted married for years, before they actually get a divorce.
Some of you may experience that too. Like you've been in a relationship and before you actually broke up, you were like, look, this isn't going to work out.
Right.
Before you actually ended the relationship.
Yeah, it's never really a dramatic thing. I am somebody who I don't believe anything happens out of the blue. I really believe if we're paying attention enough, you can see warning signs of things getting worse and worse and worse, or better and better, before they hit this, definitive breaking point of a divorce or of a sickness or whatever the case is. So, all that to say, whoever asked this question, I love that you are seeking God and seeking freedom and seeking wisdom when it comes to this relationship that you've had, that you're trying to get free of and kind of do better with. I think that be really gentle with yourself. Don't be mad at yourself that you're like, hey, I'm still like attached to this person. What's wrong with me? Nothing's wrong with you. What's wrong with you is what's wrong with all of us, and that's sin. Like we all have had some type of toxic, unhealthy relationship with one person or other, and it takes time. I remember my relationship in high school, like after we broke up 1-2 years after that, I was still like thinking about this man and still like kind of like wondering about him more than I should have been. And I got kind of mad at myself about that, but I share that to share, it takes time to move on and to untangle yourself from someone. Because think about it, you probably didn't get tangled up with them overnight. I mean, maybe you did like physically, but emotionally it probably took some time. So just be really gracious with yourself. Keep going, keep moving, keep making steps in the right direction. And even when you do take steps backwards, like don't let the enemy tell you like, oh, well, you might as well just keep going that way because you already started. Like, no, God's mercies are new every single morning. So if you made a mistake, you texted them, if you're going through their Facebook or whatever the case is, or Instagram, we don't really do Facebook anymore. If you're looking at their stuff and you shouldn't be taking you down this dark path, just say, okay, today's a new day. I'm going to try again. And then just string together a bunch of really great days. And the next thing you know, you've had a month, 2 months, 3 months, 6 months of untangling. And also don't tangle up with somebody else trying to untangle with a previous person. Don't that saying people say, the best way to get over someone is to get under someone else? It's not true.
That's how it be in Hollywood.
Don't do that.
You watch the movie, girl, we're gonna go to the club, we're going to the club, we're going to the bar, we're gonna get you out.
Yeah, or they're talking about, we look about like celebrities Wikipedia pages and they're like divorcing people the same year they get married to someone new. Don't do that either.
That'd be crazy.
Yeah.
Yeah. I love that. I love the take it slow, because I think sometimes we can be so frustrated with ourselves when we're like, man, I should be over this. I should have been did this. And it's like, it takes time, because you a lot of times you didn't develop that soul tie most likely overnight. Now it could have been a one night stand maybe, but most likely this was something that took time to develop. And just like you can't gain 30 pounds and expect to lose the whole 30 in 30 days.
I mean, the reality is it's a lot easier. You gain weight quicker than you lose it. So you have to be more patient with yourself when you are trying to get free and get healthy of things. Because this is a sinful world. If you wanted to find sin, you could do it literally in 3 minutes. But health is a process. The enemy does not want you to be healthy. He does not want you to be free of this relationship. So he's going to make it really hard for you. So I think that's, again, goes back to the expectations. Like, don't expect it to be easy. Know that it's going to be hard, but it'll be worth it.
Yeah. And trust that God is with you through this process, and make sure that you're involving him in the process. Like, you want to make sure that you're like truly seeking God. You're not, putting yourself in unnecessary situations consistently. So like Pauline said, maybe there's a time where you're on their Instagram, or maybe you text them, but don't continually do that. Yeah. And I think one of the things that you said helped you was you started serving and you started being involved in church a lot more. And you looked up one day and were like, I haven't thought about this person in a while.
Yeah, I didn't share that part today, but yeah, that's definitely true. Having a healthy distraction, and maybe distraction is not the best word, because distraction is like a negative word, but just fixing your eyes and fixing your attention, your energy on something else. So if you have just gotten out of a situation, you're trying to avoid the situation, people have this term, it's not biblical, but like idle hands are the devil's playwork. So a lot of times when people have free time, that's when they end up sinning.
Idle hands are the devil's playground.
Playground? What did I say? Playwork?
Yeah, I don't know what.
Sorry. You guys know what I'm saying. But yeah, so when you have nothing to do, it's very easy to get into trouble. And we see that with teenagers. If you guys have little siblings or nieces, nephews, whatever, a lot of times parents are trying to keep their kids, their teenagers, or those who are younger really busy, because if they're not in sports and arts and music, it's easy for them to get into gangs and things that they shouldn't be in.
I mean, that whole idea of replacing is biblical. Yeah. If you think about the story where Jesus talks about the person who had a legion of demons in them, and they cast it out, but then the demons came back and the person ended up being worse off than they were before, because they didn't fill themselves with the Holy Spirit, but it was an empty void. And that's why you can even see it naturally, right? You see somebody who maybe they used to be an alcoholic and somehow they got clean, but then unfortunately they slipped back into alcoholism, and the second time was worse than the first time.
Yeah, that's so true. When I was growing up in elementary school, we had
alcoholic teacher.
No, we had these like recess teachers, and like they would watch over us during lunch and recess, I guess, while like the real teachers, like that was their lunchtime or their playing time or whatever. And one of the teachers, she faithfully every day had this lollipop. And I later learned, why did I know this on the elementary school Blacktop Gossip? But I learned that she always had a lollipop because she used to be a smoker. So she had the lollipop because she was so used to putting something in her mouth, which is actually really smart, because I also learned later that a lot of people who stop smoking, they actually gain a lot of weight, because instead of smoking cigarettes, they're not putting food in their mouth, because again, they're just used to that motion.
I only know that's a thing because Fast and Furious, the guy Han on there, he was a ex-smoker, and he would always eat chips. And she was like, "You used to be a smoker." So that's for the fellas.
It's one of Tim's favorite movies. But yeah, so I like to say you need to replace the relationship with a healthy relationship. I mean, you really need to be replacing it with Jesus and spending more time with him, but also like healthy community, all those things. And that's why I said don't replace it with another person, like another boyfriend or girlfriend, but replace it with something healthy. So
yeah, that's good. Honestly, replacing it first with Jesus, because if you had a soul tie because of a sexual relationship, Jesus wasn't in your relationship, and most likely a lot of times people have that
could have been in it, but he wasn't controlling it.
A lot of times people had their partner in the seat that God should have had in their heart.
Sure, and that's how you end up.
So you want to make sure you replace that person in your heart with the Holy Spirit, with God, And that will definitely help you go a long way. Quick commercial break. If you haven't heard already, we are hosting our first ever singles mixer, the 1-to-1 singles mixer. For every one woman, there's going to be one man there. What do you have to say? I want you to get.
We're so excited about it. There's going to be absolutely zero speed dating, so you don't have to have any anxiety about that. But we are going to have plenty of activities and ways for you to meet people and have meaningful, intentional conversations with the opposite sex. Hopefully leave there with a number or two if you're a guy. Hopefully leave there with some dates on the calendar for my ladies and my guys. But the only way that we can make that happen is to secure that 1-to-1 ratio. So guys, we need you to purchase your tickets. If you're in the DMV area, or if you want to take a little road trip out here on May 5th, we would love to have you. This is, I'm telling you, going to be like a mixer, an event you've never been to before. You don't want to miss out. There's only 18 tickets left for the guys, so make sure you click the link below and get your ticket now, and invite some friends too.
All right, let's move to the next question. How do you make and keep platonic friends of the opposite gender? How do you keep and make? I think sometimes we can overcomplicate things. I think the way you make opposite sex friendships is the same way you make same sex friendships, in the sense of you connect with them, you show interest in them, you get to know them, you do things that are similar. Now I get that women and men are different in how they connect, but I'm just saying, like, connecting with people isn't necessarily different. I would more so want to know why. Why do you want to be friends with the opposite sex? Is it because you're trying to find mates?
Yeah.
Is it just why? And the reason I say that is because there's this whole debate: should men and women be friends? When you get married, should you keep your friends of the opposite sex? What should that look like? So I just want to be mindful of the heart going into it, because especially if you are someone who's like, I don't want to have opposite sex friendships when I'm married, what's the point in really developing a bunch of those now? Again, if it's for the purpose of trying to find people to date, that's a different question, and maybe you can answer it from that perspective, but I just would want to know why first you. And also, what's the definition of friendship? Because you can be friends with somebody, but you're really associates.
Right.
Or
what does it mean to be friends?
Right. Or you could be friends with somebody and it's like deep. I think it's healthy to have a lot of different associates of the opposite sex. And maybe y'all have a group chat and it's you and it's a bunch of mixed gender people in there.
Mixed gender.
Okay. A bunch of women and men in the group chat. It's 2023. You got to be clear. Or maybe you go out on different group dates with people, whatever. That definitely is safer than you just having a bunch of opposite sex friendships. And people can get in their feelings when we talk about this topic, because it's like, I'm grown, I can do what I want. Or there's this one person who's like, well, it's worked for me, I got opposite sex friendships, and like, that's great. But I think when you're talking in general, it's something to be mindful of, because it only takes one incident for opposite sex friendship to go wrong.
Yeah, and we've definitely heard a lot of stories of people who are like, oh, I can do it, and then 6 months later it's like, this girl likes me, this guy likes me. It's like, I mean, this is how like our biology works. But yeah, I love what you said. I definitely think the reason why you want to be friends with anybody is really important, whether they're same gender or not. I don't think there's anything wrong with you wanting to have more guy friends or girlfriends to expand your network or community of like potential people to meet. But I also think that like you should be genuine, and like if just because someone isn't a potential, someone that you would date, that you wouldn't be friends with them, because you don't want to use people, and people can like sense that, and you don't want to like build a reputation.
Yeah, we got a good follow-up question. Would you not recommend talking to guy friends about the guy you're interested in?
Guy friends, okay.
I think it could be helpful to get a male perspective as a friend.
I agree. Yeah, I think that it's so much easier for people if you have like brothers, because obviously brothers or sisters, because like obviously they're going to be on your side. Number one, they're highly invested into like somebody who you are dating, and they can be biased too, but especially if your family's crazy and they're like about to roll up on somebody. But yeah, I think that like that's the best option for getting like advice on like, oh, like a guy said this to me, what does this mean, or like what should I do or whatever. If you don't have brothers or sisters or cousins or family members that you can trust, that you feel are wise, that can give you kind of like that perspective when it comes to dating, the best next option is going to be like friends or mentors that are married, just because again, these are people who you know are not interested in you. Now that's the trouble when it comes to asking friends for advice, is because if you're a girl and you ask your best guy friend Brian, hey Brian, I really like this guy Frederick, you know, what do you think about him? And Brian is single, you don't know if Brian really likes you or not, and you don't know if he's going to give you unbiased advice. Now obviously we get into nuances of like, oh, if you guys have been friends for 15 years, or like, you know, that he's dating another girl or something like that, like, yeah, of course, like definitely if he's dating, about to get engaged, like, you know, for a fact that he's, you know, like not interested in you because he has somebody else, that might be a good option for you. But also, like, I like to get advice from people who have already been there versus people who are also doing it at the same time and kind of figuring it out as they are going, like I am.
Yeah. And I think if you can ask multiple people,
yeah,
that honestly is best, that you trust, obviously. The reason I say that is because the Bible says there's safety in the multitude of counselors. Right. So maybe you only have one guy friend, but you have someone at church who you trust, who's married, that you can ask. Or you have other people in your life who you can bounce that idea off of instead of just having that one person. I think that can be helpful.
Because I think that like we kind of have to talk about what it means to be a friend and have a friend, because like you can get advice from your friends, but most of the time you're getting perspective from your friends. So what do you think about this? What's your opinion? And it's not always like tried and true advice. Hey, if I were you, this is what I would do. Or when I was in your seat, this is what I did, and this is how it turned out for me. Kind of think about like when you go to your parents for advice, if you do that, like your parents are not like, your friends, I always think about your friends are someone on your level, like your parents, mentors, people who are a little bit further in life from you that you're getting advice from. They're not necessarily like on your level. That doesn't mean you don't have a friendship with them, but they're not just your friends. Because I think a lot of times, you know, our friends are like our peers, people we're walking among. You think about like, all right, we're all kind of like doing this together, we're all in the same kind of like, not season of life, but stage of life. And that's why age a lot of times doesn't really matter, because there are some people who get married really young and they have a lot of wisdom in relationships and stuff like that, and there are people who are older who have never been married and they've never really had any relationship wisdom, and that doesn't mean that they're not wise in other areas. Like you wouldn't go to, you know, somebody who is an engineer and ask them for advice about getting into medical school. They just haven't done it. They don't know. They could look stuff up for you on Google and like kind of ask around and friends, stuff like that. But you would ask them about going to become an engineer. You wouldn't ask them about becoming a doctor. So yeah, that's why I get a little weary about people saying like getting advice from friends. It's like, I think you can get perspective from them, and you should definitely involve them in your dating process and like introduce them to the person that you're interested in, get their perspective, all those things, but what they like about them, what they don't, what their concerns are. But you should also have people above you, ahead of you, whose voices are a little bit, have more weight, I would say, than your friends, because friends can be fickle. They'll tell you, girl, don't be with him because his shoes are whack. Who cares? Like that has nothing to do with anything. So
yeah. So let's go to the next question. Do you have Bible/devotional time as a couple in addition to individual Bible study time? How do you make time for it as a couple, especially when dating? So I think this is
such an interesting question.
It is. And to be transparent, we don't necessarily have that much strategic, planned Bible study time together. We absolutely both on our own every day read our Bibles, spend time with God. But as far as, yo, today we're going to sit down and go over Mark 3. Like, we don't personally do that. And I think this question, especially when we get to the dating part of it, is honestly going to vary based on who you talk to. Because there's some people who are like, when you're dating, you shouldn't even pray together. That's too much. And there's some people who are like, you should pray every day. So I think, and there's no Bible on it, right? So I think it's something that you have to figure out, what am I comfortable doing? And are you comfortable praying with somebody every day? Are you comfortable if you have a weekly devotion time? Something that we've often said is, be careful of doing something with your dating partner that you don't do with other friends.
Yeah.
Because at the end of the day, the person you're dating is just your friend in God's eyes right now. There's no covenant. You're not married.
There's no commitment. There's no responsibility.
So you want to be careful. But when we dated, we didn't start this way, and you definitely don't need to be on the second date and y'all gonna start praying together. But like, eventually, the longer we got in our relationship, I believe we got to a place where we maybe pray weekly, like once a week.
Especially because engagement is very
especially in engagement, like once a week we would pray together intentionally. It was on the calendar and we were focused.
And we had a prayer list that we would share. Yeah.
Now in marriage, we do pray every day together. We do that before we go to sleep. And it's very rarely is it like super long and deep. But we do have every month, there's some time where we will intentionally seek the Lord. And it's technically individually. But one of the things that works for us, and again, it's going to be different for each person, and you got to figure out what works for you and your partner when you're married. But what works for us is, Pauline may read something in the Bible, or I may read something in the Bible, or she may hear something in a sermon, or I may hear something in a sermon, and then we'll talk about it, say, hey, this is what God's speaking to me, or this is what God is telling me. And then we have a discussion about it.
Yeah.
That tends to work for us more than to, hey, every third Tuesday, we're going to sit down and read a devotion. We've tried to do things like that before, and we're just not that consistent with it.
Yeah.
And like I said, every couple is different. I know, like, our church twice a year has what we call Pray 21, where we will meet as a church at 6 a.m. in the morning and pray. I know some people who won't go without their spouse. Like, they'll literally wake their kids up and take the kids at 6 a.m. to church so that they can be together to pray because they're married. Whereas us, we're not waking our son up at 6 a.m. because it's not that necessary. We prefer to go separately. So Monday, I'll go to prayer, and then Tuesday, Pauline will go, and then the other person will stay back with our kid. And for us, that works better than going together. But again, I don't think there's necessarily a right or wrong way.
Yeah.
I think it's just, what do you feel good about? What is the Lord leading you to do? How do you feel? And first and foremost, what's most important is you have your own personal relationship with God. And I think that's where you can definitely get in trouble in the dating stage, if you, especially too early, if you start trying to do a lot of spiritual stuff, is because there's already some natural emotions and hormones and endorphins that are going off that are blinding you from certain things, because you got those I'm in love feelings, or you got those I think I may be in love feelings. And that sometimes things can get weird unnaturally when you're too early in a relationship. And like I've seen people where they start dating and they're like, for some reason, the person they're dating starts becoming their God. And instead of going to God in prayer, instead of talking to God about certain things, they always run to their partner first.
Yeah.
And they're kind of replacing God. Well, we talked to somebody on our podcast before. Our friend Mo, he talked about when he was in a relationship, God checked him. It was like, you don't spend time with me anymore.
Right.
Like, you do all your time with your girl, and that's just something you want to be mindful of.
Yeah. Yeah, I think that all that is really good. It's so interesting because it is all very culture based. Like, a lot of it's going to be depending on like what church you go to and like what you see around you, maybe what type of family you grew up in, and what people's expectations are there. Because like a lot of people, I'm honestly thinking about people who aren't like really saved. It's like more like churchgoers and people who feel like their relationship with God is very private. And very like, this is, I don't pray out loud. I don't really tell anybody about what God is doing in my life or in my heart or whatever. And I don't think that our relationship with God should be a secret. There are private parts of your relationship with God.
I think I've heard you say before, like, you need to know that they can pray.
Yeah, exactly. And like,
be having grace.
But that doesn't mean you need to pray together every day to know that. Like, you can be in an environment with somebody and hear them pray in a group setting and
make sure they say grace
and know that, it's, you can tell when someone prays a lot or when they don't, like how, like their level of confidence with that. But yeah, so I don't think that you need to be too hung up on it, especially when you're dating. I feel like you need to ask yourself why do I want to have devotions with this person? Why do I want to pray with them? I think if it is like, oh well, because he's my boyfriend, because she's my girlfriend, this is an area of my life, I want to connect with them spiritually. Well, you can connect with people spiritually and still have boundaries. And at the end of the day, your relationship with God was there before you met this person, and it'll be there after that person is gone. Even if you get married, like that's true for him. That's how I think about my relationship with God with Tim. Like, I had it before I met Tim, I'll have it after Tim and I's, whether I die first or he dies first, or whether we die together, I don't know. But like, I'll have that forever. Like, my relationship with God is my anchor. Like, that needs to be strong in order for even me and Tim to be good. And I think that a lot of times Christians think like, oh well, I'm with another Christian, then we should be able to share this together. And like, yes, but also like, no. Because like, you share, like for instance, Tim and I have a son, right? We have a relationship together as a family, but I have my own relationship with Joshy. I have time with him. Tim has time with him sometimes, and we have time together. But it doesn't mean like I can't hang out with Joshua without Tim, or I can't be with Tim without Joshua. It's not like we're a package deal in that sense. If that is kind of like a different way to think about it. Because at the end of the day, like, especially when you're dating, like, you and that person are not one, you're not together. And even though God hopefully is in your relationship and you are inviting him and you are seeking him together, but people, I guess, feel like, oh, to seek God together means we pray together, we read the word together. And that can be a part of it. But a lot of times I think what's more important is to seek God on your own and come together and say, hey, what is God saying to you? This is what God is saying to me, and kind of see where it aligns and where unified. And we do that as a couple too.
Can I say something? That's a good point you hit on, because I think if you're getting too intertwined spiritually, sometimes you can be carrying somebody spiritually and not even realize it, because, oh well, we pray every day together, or we read the Bible every day, and it's like, really it's you praying, really it's you coming with a fresh word from God, and not really them. And you just want to be mindful of that.
Yeah. So there's if you are going to have some type of like Devo time or prayer time together, just make sure that that's not your only time or your main time for connecting with God.
Yes, please.
Because at the end of the day, like we said, your relationship with God is individual. It's personal, and you need to protect that. It would be kind of strange if you and your dad are really close, and then all of a sudden when you get married, you only talk to your dad when your husband's around. Like, that's not how it was. Like, you guys can still have your thing, and then your husband comes along or your wife comes along. But
so to be clear, there's absolutely nothing wrong ever with reading the Bible or praying or talking to God. We're just saying, be mindful of your heart in the situation and how it's affecting you, and also be mindful of if you're still connecting with God on your own outside of that. All right, I think we can go to the next question unless you were...
Yep.
Cool. So the next question is, I have a non-believing boyfriend. I told him that I wanted to stop having premarital sex. He just told me that if we are taking away sex, then we shouldn't be going on dates. Previously, we had an agreement on a 2-date minimum per month because I wanted to see more effort and I wanted to come up with new experiences for us. What should my next steps be, or what should I say to him regarding the importance of dating?
You should break up. That's it.
Next question. No, seriously, this is a big red flag. Everybody always talks about red flags. Like, what's a red flag? This is a red flag.
This is a blinking sign.
Not even just like, obviously, like the sex part is a red flag. The non-believing boyfriend part is a red flag. But just if we take the spiritual stuff out really quick, the potential selfishness that we're seeing here is
Yeah.
also wild, because it's like, okay, now because you're not getting what you want,
You're gonna take away.
I'm not going to give you what you want.
Yeah.
I don't want no dates, so I'm not going to give that to you. I'm going to punish you. And that's something to be mindful of when you're dating somebody. Are they petty? Because in a relationship, my dad told me this growing up, like when he was looking for a wife, what was really important for him was to make sure he found somebody that he could agree to disagree with. Because in relationships, arguments are going to happen, but he wanted to be with somebody who they know how to push his buttons. He knows how to push their buttons, but they both choose not to push each other's buttons.
Yeah.
Because honestly, at the end of the day, that's just petty. Like if you're like, look, I know how to anger you. I'm going to say this one thing. Why? That's not helping the relationship go forward. Just like in this situation, not going on dates is not helping the relationship move forward. Now, that's just a side note on some practical stuff. But on the spiritual tip, obviously, I don't know if you weren't saved before you got in this relationship, and then you got in a relationship, or I don't know if you were saved first and then tried the missionary date. So depending on how that worked out, you're going to be careful, because the reason I say that is if you were already saved and you started dating somebody that isn't a believer, why? Why did you do that? Like that's not a good idea. You're setting yourself up for failure. But most likely this situation seems like it may have been she was already in the relationship and then got saved. So it's going to be a hard decision for you, but unless he gets set on fire for the Lord, you should just end the relationship.
Probably not even then,
because
the emotional immaturity.
Now, here's why I say that, because you may be listening to this. No, like you don't know our relationship. You don't know him. The reason I say you need to end it is because the Bible talks about bad company corrupts good character. Yeah. So no matter how much you want to not have sex, y'all going to end up having sex, which you don't want to do, it seems like, because if you stay around them long enough, they're going to get what they want. You're going to give into it, even if you don't want to right now. You just want to be mindful of that. I'll let you go.
Yeah, I mean, the Bible says in Amos 3:3, I think it is, like, how can two walk together unless they agree? And if you guys don't agree on boundaries, on just character, like how you treat one another, it's just not going to, it's going to set you up for a pretty miserable future. And if this is the mindset, and that's the thing is, a lot of times people date thinking like, oh, well, they'll get better. Once we get married, he'll change. Once we have kids, they'll change. And that's never, often people get worse when you get more, when you add more pressure. I don't mean worse, but like their true selves are magnified. So if this is who he is and who he's showing you to be just as a boyfriend, where it's just honestly supposed to be all fun and games at this stage.
Marriage is going to be worse.
Yeah, bro. It's going to be, and like you don't want to just think about who you'll be in 10 years. Like 10 years, picture yourself 10 years from now, and you don't want to look back at who you are now and say, dang girl, like you saw the signs and you ignored them because of whatever reason, because he has good money, because your parents like him, because he's cute, because the ratio is bad. I don't know. Whatever the reason why you're with him, you're staying with him. You don't want, your future self to regret that. You don't want your future daughter to grow up viewing, that type of treatment.
Don't let fear drive your decision.
Yeah, absolutely. So, if you don't agree on how to treat each other, it's going to be a really miserable time. So if he doesn't respect your boundaries, which is going to be hard for him to, because you guys don't have similar morals and just kind of like standards of living and thinking, it's going to be really hard. But I'll tell you this, whatever you surrender and give to God, he always gives back to you 100 times better. It may take some time, and it may not look the way that you want it to look, but it will always be better.
Yeah, that's really good. All right, let's go to our next question. I was curious if you have spoken about church hurt. I believe my current fiance is dealing with this because of being forced into church by parents growing up. she now will go to church with me, but it's only because she knows that's what I like, but not because she has a relationship with Jesus. The walls are still up, in my opinion, because of her past church hurt. She never was shown the love of Christ, just told what to do and what not to do. So
So it's not really a question.
not really a question, but I guess essentially what they're trying to get at is like, how do I help my girlfriend love Jesus?
Fiance.
My fiance love Jesus. That's kind of what I'm thinking from it. I don't know if you.
Yeah, this is a tough situation. I mean, you sound extremely compassionate, and generous towards her and gracious towards her. So shout out to you for being that way. And that doesn't surprise me because it sounds like you love Jesus for yourself and you have your own relationship and experience with him. And I'm sure he's been that way towards you. I know that he has. Yeah, I mean, it's really tough because you can't force people to be something or do something that they don't want to do or be. And it sounds like she has good reason for kind of like her experience, but we've all been through hurt and trauma and just hard situations, and people take steps to health and towards freedom when they're ready. And without, sometimes that being ready means getting kind of like a fresh revelation of who God is, of who they are, knowing that freedom and health is even possible. Like some people just don't, like she may think like, oh, well, all churches are like this. Why would I try? If the church is like this, then that means God is like this. Like she may not know, the goodness and the goodness of God, the love of God, just like it sounds like you described. The best thing that you can do, really with any unbeliever that you love, is to tell them your experience with God and tell them what God has done in your life and demonstrate that in a loving way. Like, hey, I used to be lost, but now I'm found. I used to be blind, but now I see. And nobody can deny your experience or kind of talk their way out of your experience. This is your experience. And maybe you've already done that. I mean, you guys are engaged, so I'm guessing you've had a lot of deep and meaningful conversations about yourselves, about what you want for the future. So if you have done that and shared your story and shared and demonstrated God's love, and treated her with love, I think, it's really up to her and up to God about like how she's going to respond. If she knows about another option, and she decides not to go down that route. And of course, most of us, it takes us some time to trust God and to surrender to God when we've gone through such pain. And that's okay. One of the things I love about the Lord is that he does not rush us. He is never telling us like, hurry up, like I got stuff to do. I don't have time to sit around and wait for you to be sad and mopey. Like that's not his disposition at all. He's very like, hey, whatever you need, I'm here. However long you need, I will be with you. And I love that about him. And I know that he has that same heart and compassion towards your fiance. But I also would take time to seek God about, hey, God, I love this girl. I want to be with her. But do you want me to be with her? Should I be with her given her state? And I say that because, you all are engaged and it sounds like her mindset and just the state of her heart, it is something that is serious and something that it will affect your marriage. It will affect, the way that you all live your lives if you do get married. And I think it's really hard because I'm positive you're in love with her, and I know that you care for her the way that you even wrote this question. But sometimes the best thing that we can do for people is to let them go, because being with God is more important for her than her being with you. And I don't know how long y'all have been together, but clearly, the love that you've shown her has not, God may have more. God may have another way of reaching her. And if he tells you to be with her, then great, that's fine. But also just know what you're getting yourself into and know that it's going to be an uphill battle, and pray and ask for the grace to love her the way that you need to, because it's not going to be easy dragging somebody to church and, kind of having to wait for them to have this affection and love for the Lord that you do. And yeah, so I would just say be a little bit weary of that. I don't know what the right thing to do is because I don't know, obviously, like your history and things like that. But I think that you have an opportunity.
Yeah, the Bible says to count the cost. And I think everything you said is really good. I think it's really important to make sure, like Pauline said, please pray about it. Like, I don't want you to underestimate how much of a big deal this could be once you
And
get
seek
married.
wisdom too. Like pray about it as well. Yeah.
I don't want you to underestimate how serious this could be in your marriage. Pauline was saying it, but like I want you to really get the importance of this could have a big issue in your marriage of you may not be forcing her to go to church, but you may be encouraging her to go to church when you get married. And then she may look at that as, oh, he's trying to force me just like my parents. And then she may shut down completely on you.
Yeah.
And then she may not want to go to church at all anymore. And then that could cause even more of an issue in your marriage, which is going to put a drain on you. So that's just something you want to consider. Is that something just practically that you want to experience and live with on a daily basis? Another thing I want to say is there's a difference between church hurt and a relationship with Jesus. I want to make sure that we all understand that, because this question, I feel like it's two different questions. Because one, you say, have you talked about church hurt? She was forced to go to church growing up. But then you say at the end, she will now go to church with me, but it's only going because she knows that's what I like, not because she has a relationship with Jesus. So you literally said that that to me implies that she doesn't have a relationship with Jesus. And that is a whole different situation to be in church hurt, because church hurt happens by people hurting you, not by having a relationship with God. And I think that's where the issue is like you said, unfortunately, she hasn't met any people that can love her like Christ, but it sounds like she also hasn't really met Jesus who will love her in a way that is real to her.
Mm-hmm.
So that's another red flag or something that you want to be aware of. So I think, like Pauline said, seeking wisdom, meaning hopefully you two are in premarital counseling. If you are, this needs to be a topic that comes up immediately, because I don't know any pastor who wouldn't deal with this. This is very serious. Again, we're saying this because we're married, and like we know like stuff that wasn't maybe that big of a deal, or stuff that we didn't think would be that big of a deal before we got married ends up being a big deal in marriage. And we just want to make sure that you really understand that this is something not to take lightly. Like, please go seek premarital counseling or help from mentors to kind of walk you through this and make sure you really pray about it to the Lord.
Yeah, because the question sounds like you're looking for help for her, and that's already troublesome, because like obviously you want to be supportive of the person that you're with, but you can't heal for them. Like if I broke my foot and I needed to go to rehab and go to the doctors, like Tim can't go there and say, oh, my wife broke her foot, like that's why I'm here. Like, I have to go. He can come with me. He can drive me. He can cheer me on. But I'm the one who has to do the work. I'm the one who has to do the exercises. And if she's not willing to show up for herself because she doesn't know how, all the grace and all the love towards her, because I know that it's hard and she's just not ready yet. So that's why I'm kind of wondering, like, is this an opportunity for you to make a different decision when it comes to taking your relationship to the next level, given her state? You don't want to put pressure on her or put a responsibility on her that she can't handle.
Yeah, we got a great follow-up question. Do you think it's okay to date someone who has a relationship with God but doesn't go to church or want to go to church?
That is a good question.
Me personally, that would not work for me. Couple of reasons why. One, it's hard for me to believe, especially if you have access to churches. Like in America, if you live in America, then you definitely have access to a church where you live. If you live in a different country, it could be a different situation potentially.
Yeah, and more dangerous.
But if it's an American context, I don't get how you could have a thriving relationship with God, an active relationship, and it's not leading you to some type of church.
Right.
Because the Bible and God calls us to be in community with other believers. And I know that unfortunately they say that church membership and attendance is dwindling these days, but I just don't see, I wouldn't want to be with someone who isn't attending church regularly, because that's something that is important for me. And that's something that you want to remember when you're dating. Like, it's okay for you to want certain things and want to be with somebody who wants the same things, especially when it's things as serious as your faith. And it's not wrong for you to want to be with somebody who wants to go to church.
Right.
Or like that's not a bad thing. What would you say?
Yeah, I agree. I mean, I think that I would have to ask, like, why doesn't this person go to church, or why don't they want to go to church if they love Jesus?
A lot of conversation is necessary.
Yeah, because it's one thing, like, if they just moved and they just,
of course,
yeah, like, whatever, like, okay, like, I'm in the process of, finding a new church or whatever, something like that. But that's different. Like, if you don't go to churches, I don't want to go to church, because if you're actively looking for a church, or you're like shopping around, like, then you want to go, and that's a good sign to me. But if you don't want to go, I would definitely want to know why. Like, maybe there's some church hurt involved, or something happened. That person doesn't feel safe at a church. I think that it's definitely a sign of maturity, though. I think that, especially in this day and age, during COVID, whatever I'm going to call it, virtual church is so accessible, and it is so great to have that. If you're sick, you're not able to go to church, you can of course watch online. But I think that sometimes people use that as a crutch of like, oh, I don't have to go in person anymore because I just I worship and watch the sermons online. And I think that, like, the first thing that comes to mind is, like, there's levels to this, right? So, like, if you are somebody who works out, there's only so much you can do from home, unless you have one of those, like, super, like, decked out home gyms and you spent tens of thousands of dollars getting all this equipment. But most of us doing YouTube videos, it's not going to get you so far, right? In your weight loss journey or your fitness goals, if you're trying to gain muscle, whatever that, those types of things. Like, you're going to need equipment, you need weights, you need, you're going to need some assistance. And I think that that's true when it comes to our spiritual lives and our relationship with God as well. Like, you absolutely can have a private relationship with God, and you should, and you do. And you should be seeking God every day on your own and reading your word and worshiping and all those things. But it comes to a point where it's like, you don't have anybody around to correct you. You don't have any friends. You don't have any community. You don't have any mentors or leaders in your life to tell you, hey, here's another way to do it. And I've heard this great analogy before. We talk about, of course, Jesus was crucified on the cross, his feet at the bottom and then two hands at the top. But you can nail your feet in one of your hands, but you need somebody to nail the other hand on the cross. If you were thinking about, dying to yourself, living your life for Jesus every single day. And you can only correct and lead yourself, but so far, because we all have blind spots. That's what we talk about a lot, like mentorships and community and people who are further ahead, because people, like, see things that you don't see. And that's, church is such a great place for that. And church is not perfect. Believe me, I can tell you stories that I've experienced personally. But at the end of the day, God has not called us to go to church and told us to go to church for our, like, luxury or our enjoyment. It's something that is supposed to challenge us. And sometimes that means dealing with, a lot of times it means dealing with sinful people and dealing with broken people. People think that sometimes church should be this, like, cool kids club, or like, oh, I'm in with the in crowd, or like, I like it here, they play my music, or whatever the case is. And that's not what it's supposed to be. Church is definitely a hospital, and sometimes you're a patient at the hospital, and sometimes you're working, sometimes you're a nurse or a doctor or a volunteer or an admin or whatever the case is. And I'm not a medical professional in any sense of the word or the experience, but a lot of times people who are medical professionals, they also need care themselves. So they go through something in their lives, and they have to know when to put take their doctor or their nurse hat off and, put on their patient hat and listen. And the same thing goes for us as Christians. And so many times we don't want to go to churches where people are all up in our business and people want to know, oh, okay, well, what's your story, or what are your struggles, or how can I support you? And it's a challenge to let people in. But at the end of the day, if you really love Jesus, like you say that you do, or this person does, you're going to want that correction. You're going to want to be pruned, because that's what the Bible says. You're going to get cut either way. So you might as well get cut in a way where you're growing versus in a way where you're getting cut and you're getting destroyed. And God's like, I'm done with you. Bear fruit no more. You stink. So yeah, I think that it's a maturity thing. For if you really are a Christian and you don't go to church, I would something had to have happened to you to make you feel like that was the best and the safest choice for you. And I think that that person is not ready to date. I think that person needs to work on getting healthy and having a healthy perspective, because at the end of the day, okay, Tim and I are married, right? I'm his bride, I'm his wife. If somebody says, oh, Tim, you're my bro, I love you, but I don't like Pauline, they're not friends. You cannot step to somebody and say, oh, Jesus, I love you, but I don't like your church. Jesus literally died for his church. And if you don't like his church, there's going to be problems. There's going to be issues. You can't love one without the other. And Jesus, and this is true, Tim a lot of times is easier to like than I am. And that's okay. So you may feel like Jesus is easier to like than his people are, than his churches, and that's okay. But that doesn't mean you stop trying and give up. That means you just keep talking to Jesus, asking him, hey, how can I get your perspective on the church? And also realizing that you are part of the church too, and that you are broken and you are sinful and you've made mistakes, helps to be more gracious to others.
Yeah. Bottom line, you can go to heaven without going to church, but it's going to be really hard for you to live a life as a thriving Christian without going to church and being in godly community. So I think that's great. I know you got so much value out of that. Which question was your favorite? I think my favorite might have been the one talking about sex and not going on dates and all of that, because what? That's just a random question to me.
Yeah, my favorite one was the one about the fiance. I think that was so real. I loved the person's heart, but also in a really tough situation. So believing that the Lord will speak to that person.
Absolutely. This has been another episode of the W Podcast. We'll see you next week. Thanks for watching this video.
To get more Christian relationship advice, subscribe to our channel.
And make sure you check out our other videos as well.